For further information, www.worldforum.org.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. My name is Bryony Schwan. I'm the Executive Director of the Biomimicry Institute. Imagine yourself as a bird flying over the location where New York City used to be, several hundred years ago. What would you see? A lush New England forest with a rich tapestry of wetlands, and plants and animals living in harmony with their environment. Now what do you see? The proverbial concrete jungle. With each acre developed, we have lost not only the beauty of our natural world, but an acre's worth of ecosystem services. Roofs reflect sunlight rather than capturing it for energy. Carbon is released into the atmosphere rather than sequestered in vegetation and soils. Buildings and streets shed rainwater into storm sewers and rush it away, rather than filtering it through the wetlands or seeping it through soils into the groundwater. Worse yet, buildings in the United States consume 39% of America's energy on an annual basis and generate 39% of America's energy, and they produce 38% of our carbon dioxide. Now think about that city transformed so that it provides the same ecosystem services as the wild areas surrounding it. This new city fits into the ecosystem. Ecological performance standards are a new way to incorporate biomimicry into community planning. Ecological performance standards ask our human building projects to put their own ecological weight, to carry their own ecological weight. Buildings, landscapes of a community should work together to provide the same life-sustaining ecosystem services as intact native ecosystems. How would you transform this vision into reality? You would work with our next speaker, Jason McLennan. Jason serves as the CEO of Cascadia Green Building Council, the Pacific Northwest's leading organization of green building and sustainable development. He is also the visionary and author of the Living Building Challenge, an international green building program. Jason is an international thought leader in the green architecture movement and has lectured on sustainability across the US and Canada. The bar set by Jason's Living Building Challenge is much harder to achieve than the highest platinum level of leadership in energy and development, the most widely recognized green building standard in the US. Jason's vision of how we build is bold and ambitious. As he told me yesterday, aim for your ideal, even if you don't make it. Because if you aim for the halfway point, that's where you'll end up. The Living Building Challenge calls for buildings to be designed and constructed as elegantly and efficiently as a flower. And in case you think Jason's vision is too far, think again. The City of Portland has posed to include the Living Building Standard as the top stretch goal above LEED Platinum, writes Kerry Kwan at the Seattle Times. His plan is nothing short of radically transforming the way the world builds. Jason is one of those rare visionaries, though, who's also practical. Along with his colleague, Bill Walsh of the Healthy Building Network, he developed pharos, the most advanced building rating system in North America. Jason's work in the sustainable design field has been published or reviewed in dozens of journals, magazines, and books. He is the author of 3 books. The philosophy of sustainable design is currently used in 60 universities around the country, and he'll be doing a book signing at 1:15 today. I believe Jason is one of the bright stars who will make a profound impact on the relationship between our built world and the energy future. And just in case you think Jason is all work and no play, he used to front for an Irish rock band. It is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Jason McLennan.
How's everyone doing this morning? Pretty good? Did you guys get chills when that bat swooped down? Oh my God. You know, this is actually my first full Bioneers, and I think that I've been missing out. This is amazing, and there is such incredible energy in this event that it's really an honor to be here with you. And I want to thank all of you and everyone at Bioneers for allowing me to come and speak with you today. Now, as your first plenary speaker, I think I have an obligation to get people charged up for the day. And I'm kind of curious if I have any fellow troublemakers, rabble-rousers, or activists in the audience today. I said I was kind of curious if I had any troublemakers, rabble-rousers. I guess I have found my people. Well, welcome. And I'm going to be talking to you today about an idea that I'm quite excited about, and many around the country are quite excited about, this idea of living buildings. And how many right-brain people do we have out there? A lot. And any left-brain folks? We got some left-brain folks, that's good. So the right-brain folks will get into this right away, and the left-brain folks just, I have some charts and graphs too for you. You like that spin? So you can focus on the flower for a minute here. And we saw some amazing photography. And I want you, in one hand, to focus on this flower. On the other hand, I want you to think about a building, a house, an office, just any building. And I want you to think about what they have in common. Now, both of them are literally and figuratively rooted to place, right? They can't get up, walk around, get what they need from somewhere else. They're literally and figuratively rooted to place. But unfortunately, that's where the metaphor often ends. But I don't think it should. And if you consider this flower, and of course, not this particular flower, but if it was still in the ground, that what this amazing flower does, this plant does, is that it gets all of its energy from current solar income. It gets all of the energy that it needs to thrive from sunlight. It gets all the water that it needs to perform its functions from the amount of precipitation that it can get from where it is. It doesn't pollute its environment while it's doing its thing. It doesn't release toxins that degrade biodiversity. In fact, it creates habitat for other microorganisms and plants and many functions in the ecosystem, as we saw from that amazing video. And it doesn't do it by remaining still. It participates in its environment. It opens and closes and recedes and springs forth. It's always active. It's habitat, as I said, just like our buildings are habitat for us. And at the same time, you can't argue that it's beautiful and that it fits. Now, shouldn't that be the set of metrics for the building that you had in mind? Shouldn't that be the criteria upon which we judge the success of architecture and the success of building and development? Should it not? We'll go to the next slide. But unfortunately, the building in the background is not as elegant, it's not as efficient as this flower in the foreground. We're not yet as smart. And our buildings do, in fact, pollute their environment. They do, in fact, use an incredible amount of energy that is not current solar income, but old solar savings, so to speak. And they have a drain that all of us here know too well on future generations. And we need to have fundamental change in how we design our cities, how we design our buildings, how we design everything. Because we've moved very, very far away from a place that is safe and viable. And I would say that the architecture that we've seen is not rooted to place. Right? Now, we've made our buildings more efficient. The green building movement has made strides. We have better windows, better insulation. But we're still losing ground. And this is interesting statistic to understand, is even though our buildings have gotten 30, 40% more efficient since the 1970s, since the 1950s, they've ballooned in size. So we have actually gone backwards. And so the average house size in the 1950s was just under 1,000 square feet, and now it's about 2,500 square feet, and even more disturbing, family size has gone down, so the amount of square foot per person, think about that metric for a minute, the square foot per person has ballooned. And it's not making us any happier. Right? We need to get that memo out that buying more stuff doesn't make you happier. And the same is true when we're talking about our homes and our offices, our schools, our daycares, all these things. More isn't necessarily better. And we've heard the statistics about the impacts of our built environment on climate change. I find it interesting, actually, if you look, and statistics are interesting, and you can slice them different ways, of course, but if you look at the portion of the transportation sector that relates to the building sector and the portion of the industrial sector that relates to the building sector, the built environment is actually responsible for about half of our impacts. So we have both a huge opportunity and a huge challenge. And you heard from the previous speaker how serious we need to be taking this challenge, that not only is climate change a serious threat, but we're learning every year that we have less and less time to deal with this threat than we thought. And the further north you go, and we have some friends out there in Alaska, the further north you go, and this is British Columbia, you're already seeing a lot of these effects. And it's heartbreaking to fly over British Columbia, for example, and look at the giant forest, essentially, that is dead and dying because of the mountain pine bark beetle, which is related to climate change. And I think that when it comes to architecture, and it comes to our communities, that it is time for us to make significant leaps, right? Not baby steps. And as I like to say, if you have all the time in the world, by all means, take lots of little steps. But if you don't have all the time in the world, then man, you got to learn to run. And our industry, the building industry, is risk averse. We don't like to change. Change is very, very scary for us. But we have to. And if we don't fundamentally change and leap when it's time to leap, then what we are going to be asking our children to do and our grandchildren is to make jumps off cliffs, essentially, that I don't think is safe for them to make. Now, the good news is that the barriers to creating the kind of built environment that we want are not technological. We have all the technology that we need now to build living buildings. Now, sure, there's some amazing technologies coming down the pipeline that might make it more efficient and more cost-effective and those things, but we actually don't have to wait for another invention. And that's exciting. You have net zero energy buildings already that generate all their energy on site with renewable energy, like that farmhouse on your left. Like this building in the middle that uses 70% less energy than the building it replaced, and the building on the right that has no sewer connection because it treats all of its water in the building without chemicals and reuses it and reuses it. What we actually need to change, I think, as everyone here at Bioneers knows, is we need to change the way people think, what they value, what they believe is possible. And there's a growing group of professionals around this country, your architects, engineers, developers, builders, that are changing very fast now. And I'm very excited by this. And this idea of building a living building is moving from a nice metaphor, a nice story, to a real program that left brain and right brain people can get their arms around. And it's called the Living Building Challenge. Now, at the end of 2006, my organization, Cascadia, and now the International Living Building Institute, launched this Living Building Challenge as a challenge to my colleagues, people in the building professions, to change the way they're building, to build buildings that are not only net zero energy, net zero water, non-toxic, a completely different level of environmental performance than is typically found in green building programs. And we put it out there, and we said, this is where we need to head. We need to try to become as smart as nature. And I didn't know what to expect. But we've been thrilled that all over this country, architects, engineers, developers are standing up and saying, we're with you, and we're going to try to figure this out. And so the Living Building Challenge, and you can go to our website and download the protocol. It's very different than LEED, which you're familiar with, but it has some things in common in terms of the categories or areas of impact. And you'll see that we've actually added beauty and inspiration. Now, sometimes our engineer friends have a hard time with that one. But by the end of the process, they understand. And later today, I'm going to be doing a workshop, I think, in this space. And if you want more in-depth information on the challenge, that's the thing to come to. Now, I'm going to give you a few examples of how the Living Building Challenge works and how we think about this. And I'm going to skip through. There's 16 prerequisites. You have to do them all. You can't pick and choose what you do. A flower doesn't pick and choose whether it wants to collect rainwater or not. And so this first one is the notion that as a species, we have expanded enough. And it's time to draw a boundary and say, no more new sites. No more new sites. So unless your project is being built on a previously developed site, a brownfield or grayfield, you can't participate. That's one example. And you have to do a habitat exchange, participate in conservation to offset the impacts that you're still having for those sites. I'm skipping ahead to our energy. This is our minimum point of compliance. Minimum compliance in our standard is net zero energy. No more coal, no more oil, no more nuclear, no more combustion. We shouldn't have buildings filled with carcinogens. We shouldn't have buildings filled with things that make our children sick. And we do, everywhere. We have chemicals in everything, our fabrics, our building materials, paints, furniture. And so we've worked with some very smart people to develop our red list. And with just a few exceptions, you can't have these things in your building. And over time, we want to get rid of those few exceptions as well. And this is actually one of the hardest things to do because chemicals are so pervasive in everything that we have. And so that's another component. That's prerequisite 5. When it comes to wood, we need to be thinking very differently about wood as a resource. And so any wood that is going in a living building has to either be salvaged wood or it has to be FSC certified. That's the minimum compliance for all the wood, not for some percentage. for all the wood. Net zero water, and this one's tough because in many parts of the country this is actually illegal. So what we're asking people to do is change the laws. I asked if there were any activists out there, and that's what we're actually doing. We've actually been participating in a process that's just made rainwater harvesting and greywater reuse legal in the state of Oregon just a few months ago. And we're going to do it in Washington State next, and we want to do it all over this country, because what we want to see is buildings. Now, if you're in the desert, you need to start thinking like a cactus when you design your building, right? So no more of those big lawns and those swimming pools, and if you're thinking of building in the rainy Northwest, you can think like a rhododendron, perhaps. And I'm going to show examples of how this is actually possible this afternoon. And of course, we want buildings to be beautiful. We want them to be meaningful, inspire people. Because when they love a place, they take care of it. They maintain it. They make sure that it runs more efficiently. And then the last prerequisite actually, and again, I'm skipping most of them, is that we need to share. And living buildings have to tell their story through a variety of mediums, and they have to be open to the public sometimes during the year to facilitate the exchange of information so we can modify. Now, you might be wondering, okay, are there actually projects on the way? And the good news is that we have 4 completed projects that are awaiting they're in their 12-month mandatory operational phase. Now, a lot of buildings don't perform as well as they were designed. That's just the truth. So we say, don't show up with us until you have gone through a whole season, and then we want to see your energy bill, not your energy model, and we want to see your water bill, and then you can get certified, right? And we have 60 to 70 projects right now in design all over the country. Now, these are going to be models for the future, and that future has to be now, as we've already heard. But these are buildings that that are popping up everywhere, and we actually now have a project in France that has joined on, and some other countries we're seeing projects. And it's really, really exciting to see schools, homes, office buildings, all shapes and sizes. At the top is a community college, green-collar job training center for the trades to go and learn about how to install solar panels in a living building that'll never have an energy bill again. That's breaking ground. The next one below that is a university facility in Vancouver, so college and university. Botanical gardens, we actually have 2. This really cool organic building is also in Vancouver. The Canadians are doing great things. And this is an art gallery for the naturalist artist Robert Bateman. You may know his work, and it's in design right now. In Portland, they're working on the largest living building project, which is a dense urban project, and that thing on the roof is a giant solar collector, right? We have a daycare facility on the right that is trying to find a non-toxic slide built within your region is actually proven to be very difficult. And that's one of the things that the team is telling us. We have to find someone to make us a slide that doesn't have any bad stuff in it. And on the left is a piece of the Phipps Conservatory in Pittsburgh, and I'm going to show more of that this afternoon. This is one of the projects that's been completed, and I know John Todd is here, and John designed the the waste treatment system. And this is the Omega Institute, and it's in upstate New York, and it was completed in May, and they're in their 12-month phase. And it's actually treating all the waste from a whole collection of buildings at this retreat center, and it generates all of its own energy to power the facility. And we're very excited about it. 2 more completed projects. On the left is a cob and straw bale house built by a couple on Vancouver Island, and it's an amazing project. On the right is in Hawaii, and it's a preparatory academy building that is a net zero energy, net zero water building that is pursuing our challenge. Now, if you're interested in these ideas, if you want to know more about living buildings, you can go to our website, ilbi.org. And we have a conference solely around this topic of living buildings and living communities. And this next year, it's in Seattle, May 5th to the 7th. I want you to know about that. Last year, it was in Portland, and we sell out. So buy your ticket early. And what's interesting is if we can imagine a field of these, all of our buildings, net zero energy, net zero water, it would be like removing every car off the road in America, and then all the Canadian cars. And then some of the European cars. And that's phenomenal. And we have a long way to go to get there. And I'm very excited today that in 3 more weeks, we are going to be launching the 2.0 version of the Living Building Challenge. And it's a unified tool that crosses all scales. So if you're doing a kitchen remodel and you want it to be a living kitchen remodel, it applies. If you're doing a street or a park and you're a landscape architect or civil engineer, the tool applies. If you're doing a whole neighborhood or a campus, it applies. It's very exciting. So we're launching that, and we're introducing a bunch of other requirements that are not found in most green building standards. Agriculture as part of the standard, right? You can see the topics. We're very excited about this, so we hope that you will download 2.0 of the Living Building Challenge. Now, I want you to help me with something. So, as I mentioned earlier, we launched this challenge to the building industry at the end of 2006, and we've seen great uptake. I've been blown away by the interest nationally in the Living Building Challenge. But we need to do much more. And I need your help. I need all of you to join with us in demanding greater change at a faster tempo, and demanding of your regulatory officials that they help invite this kind of performance, and demanding of your builders and your developers and the people in your community that they move fast towards a world of living buildings. And I'm going to ask you, as I did the green building community, to join me. And if you will join me and stand, for those that are interested, and demand a world of living buildings as fast as we possibly can, I would appreciate those of you that would stand and join me in this cause. If you want to get involved, we have an ambassador program. Come to my session. And I want to thank all of you for being you. Thank you.